Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. My name is Nick. I know on these Tuesday videos I typically talk about new releases, but I know there wasn't a whole lot last week, so I didn't talk about them last week. This week, albums come out for January 7th. There wasn't really a whole lot. So, I know if you watched the Sunday video with Ian and I, this past Sunday where we talked about our favorite albums of 2021, I said that, there was a ton of great albums that came out last year. And, it was really hard for me to kind of narrow it down to three. So I had planned on doing an extra episode this week, but because the new releases were really light for this week, I decided to do my expanded list today. If you haven't done so yet, make sure you click on that link down below. Go check out the Vinyl Den Facebook group. Just a cool place to continue the music conversation. There's also a couple other links down there. There's one for the Vinyl Den merch page where we got the Vinyl Den t-shirts and sweatshirts on there. There's also a link for the Vinyl Den Patreon page. If you want to support the show, it's always greatly appreciated. There's, I know I talked about it last Tuesday also, but there's a new link down there for the Vinyl Den Spotify playlist. If you go on there this week, there's going to be tracks from the albums that Ian and I talked about on the Sunday show. So make sure you go check out that Spotify playlist. And if you enjoy the episode, make sure you give it a old thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. I don't know why I had a hard time saying that. And hit that notification bell so you're notified every time we release new episodes. I've got a bunch of albums that I'm going to talk about today, so I'm going to kind of go through them pretty quick. I don't want to drag this out over like a 20-minute video because I know people hate watching long videos like that. But I will say that drop a comment down below. Let me know what your favorite albums of 2021 are because, like I said, there's just a ton of great ones out there. And I want to start out with three albums that aren't necessarily new albums. Well, they're not new music, but they're new albums. The first one here, this is a band that I talked about, I think it was last year, 2020. I had Dancing with the Curse on my list for favorite albums from that year, from last year, or 20. I don't want to say last year because last year was 2021, but for 2020. And they finally released their first album on vinyl. This was originally released back in 2008, but like I said, it hasn't been available until now. And this is Letters Home by Get Dead. If you guys have not checked out Get Dead, I think they've been doing some of the best punk music of the last 20, 25 years. Absolutely great band. And Letters Home it's an acoustic punk album. So it's maybe not if you aren't like a huge fan of punk music, I think this is a great entry point for Get Dead. It's available on all the streaming services, so make sure you definitely check this one out. This is the cool like black and white splatter one I picked up. I don't want to go through all the colored albums, but this is probably one of my favorite splatter albums of 2021. Just really cool. It's clear with black and white splatter. Just a great looking album. Another great album that was released last year, but it isn't necessarily new music, is Taylor Swift's new version of Red. I've become a lot more of a bigger Taylor Swift fan since Folklore was released, and just the new tracks on this. Obviously I have a copy of Red, the original version of it, and those tracks sound pretty similar, but I think Taylor's voice, she's obviously more mature now and has a little bit of a stronger voice. I think it lends itself a little better to the tracks on Red, and of course the new versions or the new tracks that she's pulled out of the vault and recorded and put on here are just absolutely fantastic tracks. But so definitely another great one. And then the last one I was going to talk about that's not really new, but it's a great new album, and that's Green Day BBC Sessions. I'm generally not a big fan of I shouldn't say I'm not a big fan of BBC session albums, but some of them are kind of hit or miss for me. This is definitely a great one. And, I think it showcases, 4 different times over Green Day's, transition from really what they kind of started out as kind of more of a raw punk band until the, more of a polished band in the early 2000s. So it's kind of cool to hear that transition over those years. So there were some great albums that came out this year that Unfortunately, didn't make my top 10 list. Albums like Detroit Stories by Alice Cooper is a great album. Sob Rock by John Mayer, Medicine at Midnight. All those were great albums. And I actually have gotten a little bit more into the new Adele album also. I've listened to it a couple more times. Wasn't really big on it originally, but the more I've listened to it, the more I've really enjoyed it. But at number 10, this album was released April 16th, and that is Let the Bad Times Roll by The Offspring. The Offspring I was never a huge fan of, but I liked their first couple of albums and kind of fell off after that. I saw them actually live back in the early 2000s. I want to say like 2000, 2001. Great live band. But when Let the Bad Times Roll was released initially, I think it took me a little while to actually check this album out. I think I bought it, maybe a week or two after it came out. And what really drew my attention was that I was reading a lot of reviews about how it was really reminiscent of that older, those earlier Offspring albums. So it's one that, I spawn this pretty regularly. It is a great album. If you are a Offspring fan, a 90s alternative fan, it's definitely a great album to check out. At number 9 is an album that I really wouldn't have probably ever checked out had it not been for people in the Vinyl Den Facebook community recommending the album. And this was originally released on April 23rd. A lot of these albums were released earlier in the year. But this is the self-titled album by Dirty Honey. Just a fantastic rock album. The first couple of times I listened to it, I really got a really strong, early Black Crowes vibe from this album. And, it's just, when people say the rock is dead, they really need to check out this album, because this is this is a newer rock band that's doing some great music. This is a fantastic album, and I'm really interested to see what they do, moving forward. But just fantastic album at number 9. So at number 8 is an album that I guess I didn't really know what to expect when it was first released. Their last several albums, were good albums, but I think they were a little bit more on the miss than the hit side for me. But I think this is definitely their best album since Blackout in 2003. It's another April album. So this was released April 30th, and that is Turn Up the Dial by the Dropkick Murphys. This is a band that, I've loved since the late 90s. Their first several albums are just all fantastic. Some of the best punk albums of the last, 30 plus years. But Turn Up the Dial, it's a lot more of a fun vibe than some of their other albums have been. So I think it's more reminiscent of some of their earlier stuff. But it's one that when it first came out, is, like I said, the same thing with the Offspring album. I think I kind of waited a little while to pick it up just because I didn't know how it was going to be. I started reading some reviews on it. People were saying that it was really reminiscent of their older stuff and a great album. It's one that it's probably one of my most played albums so far this year. And number 7 is an album that I really haven't seen a whole lot posted about, so I'm not sure what the public opinion really is of this album, but it was one that I was really looking forward to grabbing. The first couple of singles I heard released off this album were, they're really impressive, and it's another album that when people say rock is dead, granted this is not a newer rock band. They've been around for a little while now, at almost 20 years now, but their latest album, I think, is probably their second or third best album. This was released in released September 24th, and that is Life Forms by Angels and Airwaves. I'm going to take it out of it's a really shiny cover so I don't blind myself in the camera here. So Angels and Airwaves was started by Tommy DeLonge after he left Blink-182 in the early 2000s, and their first 2 albums are absolutely fantastic. But ever since that their second album came out, they had some really good tracks, but nothing that really kind of blew me away as far as quality went. But Life Forms is definitely back up there. I think that I would put Life Forms up against even some of the stuff he did with Blink-182 as far as quality goes. It just it's got that newer rock kind of sound to it. It's definitely not. If you think Blink-182. If you think Angels and Airwaves is going to sound like Blink-182, they're 2 very different bands, sonically speaking. But if you haven't checked out, Life Forms or Angels and Airwaves is definitely a good band to check out. Like I said, because they're doing some really cool rock stuff that a lot of bands maybe aren't doing. I will say that the looks of this album, they had a bunch of variants. I know people complain all the time about all the different variants. Life Forms probably had 20 different variants you could buy, but I think some of them were kind of cool looking. And this is the one I've got. It's definitely one of the better albums, that looks-wise that I bought in 2021. Just a cool overall kind of, I don't know if you call it a smush or whatever you call it at, but it's not a splatter or whatever, but, just a cool looking album. At number 6 is an album that maybe you guys might not expect to be on this list. This was released August 29th. It's not available on CD or vinyl, but I will definitely buy it on one of those two if and ever it is released. I'm sure there'll probably be some bootlegs on vinyl released eventually because there'll have to be at least a 4 LP set with as long as the album is. But this is Donda by Kanye West. I know Kanye's been kind of a polarizing figure over the last several years. Musically, though, I think this is some of the best work that he's done. The first time I listened to Donda, I was kind of... it's definitely some great tracks on it, but I wasn't really all that impressed with it. And I think they've released, I think there's been 2 or 3 versions of it now that's been released. Each time it's a little bit more polished, a little more updated. So I don't know if when it was originally released, if maybe, there was a push by the label or whoever it was to just get the album out there because it had been talked about so much, but Kanye did some really cool stuff in the lead up to the album with the big preview events that he was doing in stadiums. I think they did 3 of them, as kind of a preview of what the album was going to be. But maybe the album wasn't fully finished when it was originally released. I think it is now, and it just, I've listened to it several times since it was released, and it is a great album. Kanye is probably one of my favorite rappers of all time. Just some great tracks, and I would put Donda up there with just about anything he's done over his career. All right, so finally into the top 5. At number 5 is an album that I got a little bit of grief about when I first started posting about it, just because it was a fantastic album. I think I even talked about this when I did my best albums of 2021 as of midpoint in the year. I think I talked about this album. Actually, I think I had it in my top 3, or maybe it was one of my honorable mentions, but whatever. Now, this album was released March 19th, and that is Justice by Justin Bieber. I know people are like, oh, Justin Bieber, you think pop music and things like that, but Justin has really kind of evolved his sound over the last couple of years, and Justice, I think, is hands down the best work that he's done since his career started. And I know some of you out there might think, well, it's pretty easy to say because his music has been trash. I don't think so. I think Justin's done some great albums. I think each of his last 3 albums have been, each one has been better and kind of built on one another. If you think Justin Bieber is like that, just like 2000s pop kid, definitely go back and check out his last couple of albums because it's very different. And I think Justice, has a couple of my favorite tracks of 2021 on it. So at number 4 is an album that I really need to, kind of out myself on. That, it was released May 21st. So it's been out for a very long time. And I just listened to this album within the last month and was really blown away by it. And, I'm not sure why I never really checked it out. Sometimes I can be up or down on some female artists, especially some younger ones. And, I'm not sure if there was the whole Disney vibe attached to her that made me kind of hold off on checking her out. But I was really impressed with this album. And it's one that I've listened to quite a bit over the course of the past month. And that album, of course, is Sour by Olivia Rodrigo. Just a great album. And like I said, she's got that Disney vibe. She's been on a couple of Disney shows. And, I'm not really sure if that's why I didn't check it out or not, but it's just a great album. Most of the album is touches on, lost love and things like that. Things that you would typically expect I think she's only 18 years old, 18-year-old musician to kind of sing about. And, I kind of get her and Taylor Swift, I think, kind of have a similar vibe, at least with Taylor's more recent albums. It's just a great, fun album, and one that I've listened to quite often since it was released. I actually went out. I liked it so much. I went out and bought the alternate cover of it just because it's the collector in me. But if you haven't checked it out, it's definitely a great album to check out for sure. So finally, down to my top three. If you watched the episode with Ian, you know what my top three are. And number three is an album that I didn't really know much about. It was released August 27th. I listened to some of her earlier music and was just not really a big fan of it. But her most recent album, I was really blown away by. And of course, that is If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power by Halsey. Halsey's done some great tracks, but nothing, like I said, album-wise, it's really kind of pulled me into her music. But, pairing her up with Trent Reznor, who produced the album, definitely has more of that Nine Inch Nails kind of industrial kind of vibe. It's not an industrial album by any stretch of the imagination, but I think her vocals really pair well with what Trent was doing musically with this album. But just a great album, definitely one of my favorite and most fun albums of 2021. At number two is an album that I think earlier this year I actually had at my number one spot. So my number one and number two have kind of flip-flopped since mid-year. But this is a band and an album that, like I said, with I'm not sure what album. When I was talking about Dirty Honey. When people talk about rock being dead, this is a band that is kind of continuing on that music trend. And I know they get a lot of Led Zeppelin, bashers out there. People that say they sound too much like Led Zeppelin. I think if you sound like that classic 70s music and you're making great music in 2021, that's a good thing. I don't see how it can be a bad thing. But anyway, this is The Battle at Garden's Gate by Greta Van Fleet. Greta Van Fleet is I think earlier in their career, I think they definitely had a little bit more of a Led Zeppelin vibe. They've kind of gotten away with that with their two full-length albums, and especially a lot more, I think, with this one. And, I think a lot of the complaints that people have with Greta Van Fleet is the way the lead singer sounds when he sings. People say that his voice kind of gets to him after a little while, which, whatever. There are some musicians out there and some singers that I kind of feel the same way about. So I kind of get that. But I will say that, if you are a rock music fan and you're not a fan of Greta Van Fleet, at least check out the last half or the last couple of minutes of The Weight of Dreams, which is the last song on this album. It definitely, I think, has kind of a Stairway to Heaven vibe over the course of the track, but the last couple of minutes, it's some of the best guitar work I've heard in rock music in the last 10, 15 years for sure. And I can say that for the whole album. The guitar work on this album, especially from a kid who's in his early 20s, is absolutely stunning. And musically, I've heard a lot of people, or I shouldn't say heard, I've read people online saying that musically they're a great band, but they can't get the lead singer. Okay, I kind of get that. But like I said, at least go back and check out the last couple minutes of that track. And my number one album, I'm sure everyone can already guess it because I had it on my thumbnail on the video here, and that is Internet Killed the Rock Star by Mod Sun. This was released earlier in 2021 also. This came out February 12th. But I just got this on vinyl, I'd say the later part of the year, maybe September, October. We had to wait for a long time for this thing to get pressed. But I will say that with Internet Killed the Rock Star, I think this is where rock music is going in the future, where you're going to have a little bit more blending of different genres. And I think you're seeing that in other genres also. You're seeing that in rap, definitely. You're seeing that in country over the last 10 plus years where country artists have kind of started blending a little bit more into rock and some other genres. I think rock is kind of starting to do the same thing when you're seeing artists like Mod Sun, when you're seeing artists like Youngblood, who are doing some really great things musically speaking, and putting together great albums. I think this is one that it is definitely has more of a punk rock vibe to it, but is still Mod Sun, of course, is a rapper. If you guys don't know who he is, and he's ventured into the rock genre, but he still kind of carries a little bit more of that hip hop and rap vibe with him through a lot of the tracks on this album. But it's just a great blending, and it's one that I still spin. Ever since I bought this, I spin this one definitely pretty regularly. I think it's kind of cool to see, what bands or artists like Mod Sun and Olivia Rodrigo and Dirty Honey are kind of doing with rock music. I think when people talk about rock being dead, I don't think it is. I think it's just kind of a transition period, and there's a lot of great stuff in rock music that's going on right now, from a lot of different avenues too. You got a band like Greta Van Fleet that's heavily influenced in the 70s. They're doing great stuff. You got Dirty Honey that has a little more of a 90s rock vibe to it. You got Mod Sun Youngblood doing like early 2000s punk music. So there's a lot of really great stuff in rock music, but like I said, it's in a transition period, and I think where it's going in the future is going to be a little bit more of a blending with some other stuff, and maybe like traditional rock music, stuff that you're used to hearing in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Yeah, that kind of overall sound might be kind of gone, but I would never say that rock music is dead. It just it just looks a little bit different. But there's some really great music out there, and as you see from my list, I had a really hard time even coming up with 10. Overall there was over 20 albums that I kind of considered for my top 10 list, but that's kind of how I fell is what I listed. Well, that's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Like I said, 2021 was an absolutely fantastic year as far as music goes. I know it was terrible in a lot of other ways, but musically speaking, I was really impressed with what came out in 2021. And, hopefully we see that trend, continue moving forward into 2022. There's a lot of great albums I'm really looking forward to being released this year. But drop me a comment down below and let me know what you guys think, what you guys' favorite albums of 2021 are. There was like I said, a big long list of stuff that I could have included that, I didn't want this to be too long of a video. But if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me the old thumbs up, hit that subscribe button down below, hit that notification bell. That's all I got. Until next time, keep on spinning. Peace.